Welcome to another morning episode of Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, then I especially thank you for giving me your time so early. And you know what? I do apologize for being a little bit late this morning. Things were just running a little behind. In 1999, American punk band The Offspring came out with the hit song, The Kids Aren't All Right. It describes rough outcomes in the lives of kids as they grew up. Almost 25 years later, we might ask that same question. Are the kids all right? All right. So we're back. And I want to first start off by kind of apologizing. I did say that I was going to be on Rumble as of Monday. I did get my account set up. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance because I was just so busy this weekend to really get it set up and get that stream going to Rumble. But it will be happening. I'm going to be I'm dedicating my time to doing it. It just is a matter of, fitting it in with all the different things that's going on. So apologize, folks, for that, but it will be coming and I will start putting up episodes once I have it all set up and I'll start kind of getting these episodes that I've already done put on there so that you can watch from there. And then I'll put that information out. So just wanted to kind of get that out there right away. So again, I apologize, but we will get things moving because it's tough being a one man band here. It's just me. There's no producer. There's no like staff. Sorry, that's the way it goes. All right. So this morning, I want to talk about title of the show is "The Kids Aren't All Right." The basis for this show is a news clip from First Coast News. That's a news outlet here in Jacksonville. Now, if you're not from Jacksonville, if you're watching from somewhere else, it's okay because today's episode isn't going to be explicitly about what's going on here in Jacksonville, so it's going to be very relevant no matter where you are listening from. So what they're reporting on is there was a school fight after I don't think it was quite after, but toward the end of a football game between two rival schools. There was a food. Sorry, thought I heard my son. There was a school fight. So let me go ahead and play that clip very quickly here, and then we can get going with the show. Sorry, a little distracted here, so I apologize, folks. Let's see here. We want to do this one, and there we are. And let's bring it up here. There we go. Perfect. All right, let's play this clip.
Brand new video in showing fans leaving Fletcher High School following a fight at Fletcher versus Sandalwood High School's game. The game was cut short due to that incident. Neptune Beach police report there were no gunshots, while a Duval County school spokesperson says one person was arrested for resisting an officer. On your side, Zach
Of course.
Wilcox joining us live from the school. Zach, this was not the only incident at Fletcher High School this week.
Yeah, Destiny, the school went into a code yellow on Wednesday for a concern about a possible gun on campus. Turned out to be a Nerf gun, but still been a very stressful week for students, for faculty, and for parents. I talked with one parent about what last night was like before they found out that there wasn't a gun involved.
I got the call that every mother doesn't want to give from my ninth grader who said, Mom, I think our game was shot up. My friends and I hopped the fence. We're running home.
Within a few minutes, Fletcher High School parent Katie Hathaway's home near the school was full of 24 students who left the football game in a panic.
It breaks my heart that this is the reality for our kids. They are just trying to have fun after school at a school game, and they are running home traumatized.
Neptune Beach Police reports a large fight broke out near the entrance to the stadium, and the game was cut short with less than 5 minutes remaining. A Duval County school spokesperson says there were no reports of shots or weapons associated with the incident. That wasn't what Hathaway's 7th and ninth graders were thinking as they ran from the stadium.
Just because there wasn't a gun involved, that doesn't mean that that was in the back of every person's mind in that stadium. And the trauma is real.
Interesting. The trauma is real. Now, let's get a couple things out of the way here very, very quickly. So, first and foremost, if you watch that clip, and that was I believe that was the whole clip. I'm pretty sure I didn't cut anything out of that clip. You might be thinking that Mrs. Hathaway is just your average mom, right? Like somebody that was, that goes to work every day and, maybe joins the PTA, so on and so forth. Well, you would be wrong. Mrs. Hathaway is actually a local Moms Demand Action activist. That's left out of the report. Very interesting. It didn't mention it at all. I actually double checked it when I read the article. I watched the video like 2 or 3 times and I was like, oh, okay. They're presenting her as a regular mom. And I think this is an issue not with Mrs. Hathaway, right? She can't, like, there's nothing there's no fault of her own how the media might want to portray her. Okay. And I want to be very clear. There is nothing in this episode that is going to be an attack on Mrs. Hathaway as a mom or any mom for that matter. Okay. Because again, it's not her fault how the media portrays her. Now, I happen to know who she is, and she kind of knows who I am a little bit. We've crossed paths in the past, which I'll talk about in a moment. But while I disagree with her positions, I will say that she is doing exactly what a mom should do in her activism. Now, don't get me wrong. I disagree with like virtually every position because she's part of the Moms Demand Action Group and she sees the world through the lens of we need more gun control because more gun control is going to lead to fewer gun incidents. Okay. That is a position that I do not hold and I would argue vociferously. But what I'm doing is I'm using this story and her as a stand in for a larger conversation. Now, I also want to put all the cards on the table here. A while back, I publicly challenged Mrs. Hathaway to a public debate on how do we address gun violence? Now, she declined, citing her personal safety, which I was very clear with her that I found it rather disingenuous because she frequently puts herself out there. Okay. Now, I put myself out there as well. I have a podcast. I am the chair of the Libertarian Party. I was very clear about our position on firearms and that we take gun safety and gun handling extremely seriously. Okay. So we had this short conversation and it ended up that we just weren't going to be able to put together a debate because she felt like it was an issue with her personal safety. Now, I think that's disingenuous because um, she's out there quite a bit. In fact, just to prove my point, to make sure that people know that I'm not making stuff up, let me go ahead and play two more clips. No, two more clips, but I've merged them together. Okay. They're just two quick clips. So let's put those up on the screen real quick. Oh, there we go. All right. So this clip is Mrs. Hathaway and our new mayor. Now this was a video taken while Mayor Deegan was running for office, so she was not quite mayor at this time. So let's just go ahead and play these clips here real quick and get a sense of who Mrs. Hathaway is.
Hi, everybody. I am here with local gun safety advocate Katie Hathaway, and we want to talk to you today about something that's really important, something that is happening far too often in Jacksonville. Several weeks ago, a 13-year-old boy shot himself and his 10-year-old brother with a firearm that he frankly should have never had access to.
Today, Jacksonville residents and policy advocates join us to discuss the human impact of the Second Amendment and the consequences of lax gun restrictions that it has on our community. So joining us today are Katie Hathaway of Moms Demand Action. She's a volunteer. Hello, Katie.
Good morning, Al. Thanks for having us.
Of course. And
All right. So now you know I'm not making stuff up. Mrs. Hathaway is actually an activist, a local activist for Moms Demand Action. And the First Coast News, they left that out of the story entirely. They just presented her as if she was a regular mom. Now, again, this is not attacking Mrs. Hathaway. I'm just simply letting people know who she actually is so that I can criticize the media a little bit, but then I'm going to use her as a stand in for a larger conversation. Okay. And again, it's not her fault how the media portrays her. They should have pointed out that she was a local activist. They did not. Okay. But let's talk about traumatizing kids because I think that adults are failing our kids. We're imposing our fears upon them. And I think that's wrong. They look to us for guidance on everything from social interactions to managing our fears. What? You don't believe me? I want you to consider what every parent has experienced at least once. And I've observed out of many parents. Some event happens, child falls and gets hurt. And there's this split moment. That doesn't always happen, but there is this split moment where the child looks up, they look to you for your response, and your response really drives their the next response that they give, right? And it's not that okay if a child falls and gets hurt, if we all laugh it off, they'll laugh it off too. Although that does occasionally happen if it's something that's not very serious. But what I'm talking about here is this idea or this reality where a parent can really drive how a child responds in this moment. And I think this goes beyond just a moment like that, whether it's a scary movie, a thrilling ride at the amusement park, and yes, even gun violence. And no, folks, I am not comparing the dangers of a scary movie to gun violence. I'm simply comparing how we respond reflects how our children will respond. When I was growing up, I'm 45. When I was growing up, I went to Meadowdale High School in Dayton, Ohio in the 1990s. It was a bit of a tough school. My best friend's sister, she was like a year or two older than me. I think she was a year older than me. And when I was getting ready to graduate from middle school and go on to high school, and I let her know like, hey, I'm going to Meadowdale High School. She warned me. Now I was going to a junior high. I'm sorry, yeah, a middle school. It was a Catholic school, and the Catholic school went from elementary all the way up to uh, middle school. And she knew this, and then she knew I was going to be transitioning and going to a public high school in Dayton. And she warned me. She said, "Look, the fights here are different. They are not like the fights you've experienced." And she said, they end up frequently with like puddles of blood and the ambulance gets called. Okay. Like, no joke. And the other thing is, we had metal detectors. Now, this is in the 1990s. I graduated in 1997. Gosh, man, am I really that old? I graduated in 1997. Goodness, where's the time gone? All right. So I graduated in 1997 and I went to and when I was a freshman, I went to Meadowdale High School and we had metal detectors in the early and mid 90s. Okay. So the idea that there are threats at our school are not new. Okay. And furthermore, one of the big issues of the day when I was going to high school was guns because there was concerns that you might get shot. Now, the difference being we weren't concerned about mass shootings, but we were concerned about being shot. We were concerned about being shot over our shoes or maybe a sports jacket. That was the big popular thing. And you saw stories in the news where some kid was shot so that another kid could steal his shoes. It's crazy. Okay. Now, my mom and dad, the way that they acted, they didn't actually, I cannot recall any time where they acted seriously concerned, at least not in front of me. I mean, they might have been. I haven't talked to them since. But I do remember this one conversation that I had with my mom. So let me tell you a funny story that kind of illustrates how my mom behaved versus how maybe moms today are behaving in general. And when I was, I think it was in middle school, my mom bought me these guns. They were the guns. Good Lord. My mom bought me, she did not buy me guns, folks. She bought me these shoes that said Top Gun on them. Okay, that's where I was going. There was these shoes and they said Top Gun. They were like high tops or maybe mid tops. And they literally said Top Gun on the side and they were made of plastic, sort of. There was the weird, like I couldn't run. I had to be careful when I ran on the sidewalk because if I stopped too quickly, I literally would just slide. Like it was crazy, and I hated these shoes. And I love you, mom, but she not only bought me one, she bought me two pairs. Okay, like those were literally my Air Force Ones for anybody that remembers that reference. But she bought me 2 pair of these shoes, and I had to go to school wearing shoes that said Top Gun. Now, it might sound kinda cool, Like, oh wow, Top Gun, that was a popular movie back then. It was not a popular movie to have, or on your shoes. Okay. So I got made fun of for these shoes. Okay. Now, years later, was telling my mom about this, and I was like, I was like, Mom, I remember that when you bought me these shoes. And she got really, really apologetic. And she said, Look, she goes, I didn't want you getting shot for your shoes. Okay. So now I didn't know this until I was many years older. I had no idea that in my mom's mind, she now part of it was probably thrift, but in part in her mind was I need to buy him shoes that nobody wants to shoot him for. Turns out I never got shot for my shoes. So thank you, mom. But more importantly, I don't recall her talking. Like, and you can go online and you can see this. I've seen people talk about it. They're like, our kids are traumatized and, this and that. And, kids shouldn't grow up and have to worry about this. And, and there's all these concerns. And to a degree, I agree. I agree. It would be better if kids could go to school and they didn't have to worry about getting shot for their shoes or randomly in a huge in a huge mass shooting. Like, it would be better. But the reality is it does happen. And the way that we respond is important. So now maybe you think, DL, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, who are you? Are you like a professional? They like to say that, right? Ever since COVID, it was always, well, are you an expert? Are you a this? No, I'm not. Am I a psychologist? No. But I happen to pulled up an article here that I think bears a little bit of relevance. So let's get that up on the screen here. All right. School shootings, how parents can cope with their own fears and anxieties. So, if increased school security and active shooter drills have you on edge, which it does for many parents, mental health experts have this advice to help you cope. So, I'm not going to read the whole article. I'll have it in the show notes. You can go and read it for yourself. But it starts out last February. Lynn R. Zakari, I believe is how you say it, a licensed clinical social worker, checked her phone during a break between clients as she normally does. She had a string of text messages from her son, then a freshman in high school, reading, I'm okay. We're evacuating. I love you. Now, I'm not going to lie, folks. If my son in ninth grade, or any grade for that matter, texted me that, I would be kind of freaking out. But that doesn't change the fact that as an adult, I have to, in some way, do my best to not impose my anxieties and my concerns unnecessarily upon him. So I'm gonna skip a whole bunch of this. I'm gonna get down to what I think is the most important part. So, how do you, as a parent, cope with the fear that your child's school could be next? So here's what it says. Consider the fact that despite the rise of deadly incidents involving guns at school, statistically, these tragedies are rare. That may be hard to reckon with when your own child is being subjected to active shooter drills on campus and the increasingly regular tragedies that do occur. Still, the odds of your child being a victim of a shooting at their school are very, very small. Quote, I would underscore that even though these types of shootings are happening, they're still very rare occurrences, says Daniel Webster, director of John Hopkins Center for Gun Policy and Research. Okay. So now we're not talking about what DL thinks. We've got some experts here because people love hearing from experts. As he goes on to say, children are safer in school than perhaps any other setting as it relates to fatal violence. But the nature of these shootings, which are unpredictable and highly publicized, generate understandable fears. Now, I'm going to read a little bit more here because I think it's very important. But I do want to kind of go back and point out unpredictable, highly publicized, and understandable fears. All 100% true. I agree. Absolutely. They're unpredictable. And we do publicize them. We publicize them so much that it feels like there's a school shooting happening every day, that there are mass deaths from school shootings every single day. And so because of that I'm trying to because of it being highly publicized. Still early, folks. Work with me. It's understandable that we're filled with fear. So the question is like, how do we manage that fear so that our kids aren't living in any more unnecessary, in any unnecessary fear than they have to? Well, turns out, think of all the safe school days your child enjoys. Dr. Jerry Bubrick, senior clinical psychologist, Anxiety Disorders Center at the Child Mind Institute, encourages anxious parents to think of the chances of a school shooting much like you think of the chances of a plane crash. It could happen, it does happen, but your chances of being involved in one are so incredibly slim. Anytime a plane crashes, we hear about it heavily, but we don't hear about all the planes that are just fine, says Dr. Bubrick. The same applies to the horribly tragic school shootings. On that same day, hundreds of thousands of schools functioned safely. That's powerful and needs to be taken into perspective. And this is my point. This is my beef. My beef isn't with Mrs. Hathaway. My beef is with all of us, parents, family members, friends, whomever. We are allowing these kind of events to be so heavily publicized and so talked about as if the next one is going to be every single one of our children. But it's not. The reality is, just like airline flights, school shootings are still relatively rare compared to all of the times that schools function perfectly safely without harm. Now, I'm not advocating for public schools because you know that I'm a libertarian. And I have some beef with public schools, but I'm setting that aside for right now to talk about the comparison between when there's a school violence or when there is school violence, such as a school shooting, and when there is not. And the fact of the matter is, more often than not, the children go to school, they end up coming home just fine. And that is something that parents need to focus on. So let me tell you something. One of the interesting things is let's talk about libs of TikTok real quick. So one of my friends and my wife actually have a similar criticism of this. Now, my wife doesn't really watch libs of TikTok, but her criticism is of the same nature. My friend has pointed out, he said, if you get on libs of TikTok and you watch it all day long, you start thinking that, you start getting this perception that this is the reality. Like this is the reality that's widespread. You see 10 videos and like for instance, what they do is they will produce a lot of videos of weird lunatic teachers that want to teach your kid all about weird gender stuff when they're like in second grade, and they should be teaching them how to read and write and do math, and instead they seem to be like, okay, my whole goal is to teach your kid about gender. So you watch enough of those TikTok videos and it becomes part of the problem that you're watching all these videos and you get this perspective that, oh my gosh, maybe I better go talk to my child's teacher because maybe my child's teacher is behaving just like that. But again, similar to airline flights and crashes and similar to public schools or school shootings, it's actually relatively rare. And that is something that we need to remember. And it's something that a lot of people have pointed out. They said, hey, look, it does happen and these people do need to be addressed. However, they are by far a minority of teachers. This is not your average teacher. School shootings are not the average day in the life of a high school student. Plane crashes are not the daily expectation for people flying from one place to another. Most of the time, and not even just most in the sense of like 50 or 60%, but like in the upper 90 percentile, upper 90s, like 98, 99. I don't have the exact numbers, but somewhere up there. That is the amount of the frequency at which something does not occur. And it is up to us as parents to make sure that we put that into perspective. It's a good idea to do things to make sure that your child is ready should tragedy happen. But that doesn't mean that we should be going out and acting as if these are daily occurrences. They are not. And when we do, when we don't push back, when we don't say, hey, enough, stop publicizing it. When we don't do that, we adults, parents, impose this fear on our children. If you go back to that clip of Miss Hathaway at the very end, she says something very important. Let me see if I can't pull that up here. Let's see here. Let's get that right back up here real quick. Because I want to point this out. I think this is very important for us to know. Let's see here. There we are. All right, this is Miss Hathaway. Let's see if I can get to that last.
Isn't a gun involved, that doesn't mean that that was in the back of
Okay,
every person.
associated with
there we
the
go.
incident.
All right.
That wasn't what Hathaway's 7th and 9th graders were thinking as they ran from the stadium.
Just because there wasn't a gun involved, that doesn't mean that that was in the back of every person's mind in that stadium. And the trauma is real.
Okay, the trauma is real and that it's in the back of their mind. But the question we have to ask ourselves as responsible adults, why was it in the back of their mind? Is it in the back of their mind just because they happened to see it on the news? I don't think so. Because we have a legion of people who grew up in times where we had our own fears to worry about. Before my time, they were worried about the kids were doing drills for like nuclear. I wasn't there, so I'm having a little bit of trouble with that. But they had to like get down and cover their heads and do all these things in case there was like a nuclear attack. Right? We were traumatizing our kids. Like, oh my goodness, the Russians could be coming after us. So the commies are coming after us at any given moment. But the simple fact of the matter is, it was not nearly as true as we were presenting it. And when I was growing up, now I don't recall what the social conversation was surrounding guns. I would have to go back and look at the media and evaluate, but I can tell you how my parents treated it. My parents did not tell me I did on any regular basis that I had any reason to fear going to school. Like I knew that there were things that were happening. Like I heard stories. I was present and available. I saw them, but they largely went in one ear and out the other, at least after some time, right? Like I was concerned sometimes. And look, when I went to Meadowdale, I was picked on by some big kids. Okay. I mean, look, let me tell you, I had I'll tell you one story. This is actually simple. This is not gun violence, but let me just tell you about the intimidation factor that I had to deal with as a ninth grader going to a public high school. I'm sitting there by myself, minding my own business. This is not the start of some crazy bar fight story. I was literally minding my own business and I'm eating my lunch. A couple guys and a girl were sitting like I don't know, there's like three or four guys and a girl, maybe two girls. They were sitting at an adjacent table, and one of the girls, very attractive young lady, she yeah, at the time, I'm not saying that now. I'm just saying like at the time, I was like, wow, she's pretty. And so she came over, she put her arm around me, and she starts talking all sweetly to me, like, oh, they're picking on you, and these guys had been, teasing me or whatever. And she just kept doing this, and I could see that they're snickering, they're laughing, right? So she's coming over here and, kind of like doing this very disingenuous, like, you know what, I'm on your side. And I apologize for this. I knew that's not what was going on. What she was doing was just participating in that picking. And then I think later that same day, the guys threw like they smashed a can, like a soda can, and they tossed it down, and then they were like, "Pick it up." Right? And I was like, I just kind of sat there and just ignored them. And then they kind of got like right up in my face and they're like, you better pick it up now before, this bad thing happens to you, or whatever. And so then I finally did pick it up because, I'm 5'3". And at the time, I still hadn't quite acquired all my brazen attitude just yet. So I did, I eventually did comply. Today I'm a little bit different. So if you're big and you're tall and you're like thinking you're going to threaten me, good luck with that. But at the time, it was intimidating, right? And I knew that people did get shot at school. I knew that people did get stabbed sometimes. There were that was actually very common. I remember many stories when I was growing up, when I was going to public school, that kids were getting stabbed. And mind you, I went to a school in the 1990s, the early and mid 1990s, where we had metal detectors because kids were bringing guns into school. Kids were bringing knives into school. Okay. So I am very familiar with the intimidation factor of going to school. It has been around for a very, very long time. I don't think that's a reason to say, oh, it's no big deal. It's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that How we respond can largely drive how our children respond. And should we be imposing the level of anxiety upon them that they're receiving? And I say no. And I say that parents and adults who keep talking about this in the way that they're talking about it, talking about, oh, the kids are traumatized and oh, this thing happened, we need to stop it. We are causing additional anxiety on our children, and it's wrong. It's morally wrong. It doesn't matter whether you think that we should have more gun laws or not. We need to start acting like adults and put it into perspective. Some 30,000 fatalities happen every year from automobile accidents. Yet we don't talk about how our children are traumatized from the idea of riding in a car. We don't. Okay. We don't talk about what is it like since like 1970, there have been like 80,000 airline deaths. And these were, I believe, when I was reading this, that the airline deaths in this particular case, this number is calculated based on any passenger the moment they board the plane to the moment to before they disembark, I believe is what it was. And so any fatality that happened in that time frame from the moment they step on a plane till the moment they step off is added in this 80,000 number. And you can look it up and double check me. That's fine. But some 80,000 since 1970, I believe it was. Okay. But and a lot of people actually are afraid of flying, and I'm kind of tend to be one of them. But what we don't do is we don't talk about how our kids are traumatized from airline accidents, even though we see a whole plane go down or a whole plane get lost in the ocean, right? Like we've seen these kind of things happen, even in my own lifetime. But we're not talking about how traumatized they are. We're not talking about how traumatized kids are from all the swimming accidents. It used to be, depending on the numbers that you choose, the ages that you choose, swimming accidents or drowning accidents can be some of the up there even in the number one cause of death again depending on the age range that you choose from, right? But we don't talk about, hey, our children are traumatized from hearing about all these accidents from swimming and drowning, and the reason is because we do not publicize it in the same way that we do school shootings, and we need to stop. We got example after example after example of where we're not traumatizing kids, but where there is still a real risk, however small or however significant, right? Again, 30,000 plus fatalities every year from automobile accidents. But we don't talk about how our kids are traumatized from driving or from getting in an automobile. So, parents, if you're watching, if you're a parent, knock it off. Seriously. I mean that. And it is time for us to act like adults. That doesn't mean that we can't advocate for our children. If you believe strongly in a direction, I oppose the idea of additional gun laws. But if you believe that we should have more gun laws, then I think that you should continue to fight for them. That is part of being an American. Okay. And I will continue to fight against them. And we should make our arguments. But we should also remember that the way that we make these arguments, the way that we publicize these events, the way that we talk about them, that has a real impact on our children. And if we're not careful, when an event like this happens, where our kids think, oh no, for whatever reason, these two children thought, hey, there might be a gun incident here at school. And like 24 of them left and dashed out and ran to a local gun activist home. And I think it's very admirable that her home was available and open, and kids knew that, hey, I think there's something going on. I'm going to this house. That's a great thing. I would never begrudge a parent for having a home that a child feels safe running to if they feel that there's something happening. We should have more of that, not less. And it doesn't matter who it is, gun activist, anti-gun activist or not. I think that was a great thing. But what I do think is that it is a responsibility for adults to really watch the narrative, because it's very possible that if the narrative had been different, that when a school fight breaks out at a football game, which is actually quite common. I mean, I remember I didn't really go to football games, but I remember hearing about it all the time when I was going, like, oh yeah, another fight broke out. Okay, some fools, whatever. right? That's not uncommon. And I think there was even some comments on social media that said, hey, like I went to those schools. That does happen. Like, that's not really out of the ordinary for school fights. Our children should not be primed to immediately think that, again, like what she said, in the back of our head. It should not be in the back of their head that the moment a conflict breaks out, it must be gun violence. So adults, stop it, knock it off, act like adults. The kids aren't all right. And a lot of it has to do with us. Okay. That's the end of my show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I went on a bit of a rant. I want to thank you for watching, and be sure to catch me every Monday, every Monday, every morning, Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then again on Sunday nights at 7 p.m., where I bring on my co-host Susan Hogarth to discuss LP happenings. I want you to be sure to do all the proper audience actions. Subscribe to my YouTube channel over at youtube.libertydad.com. Ring the bell, like the videos, and maybe even drop a word or two in the comment section. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, folks, I do apologize that I'm not quite ready for Rumble. I was trying to get it set up over the weekend. I didn't get it fully set up, so I'll be working furiously to make that happen. If you want to follow me in the meantime on social media, you can totally do so. Liberty Dad on Facebook, though I'm not really on that very often. Generally, Liberty Dad Pod on X, or what you might used to remember as Twitter. You can also email me to libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And folks, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. Have a great week. I want to catch you next time, and I'm